Hey guys, Scott Adams here again. A question I get asked a lot is about friendly fraud and criminal fraud, and like what percentage of a merchant's chargebacks or fraud is one of these topics or these types. And that's a hard question because it depends on what data is available. If not the right data is there, then it's hard to even figure that out or attempt to. Also, the definitions. What are these things? Right? Friendly fraud is really difficult to classify. Beyond that, so something I like to remind people or companies to think about when they're dealing with data and metrics and tracking them is, in a way, it doesn't really matter what the definitions are, just that you're consistent with them. And so as long as the math is consistent and it's at least somewhat logical and fits the picture, then it's fine, really. But you have to stick to it and the people in the organization that use these metrics, they need to know what those definitions are and how the math works. Maybe a little more general answer. It really depends on where you are in your, let's call it, payments and fraud journey. If you're just starting versus if you're, a veteran and you've been doing this forever and your company has been doing these things for a long time, then how I see it is that in almost most cases that I deal with, the vast majority of fraud is friendly fraud. Now, if you're really early in your journey and maybe you have no maybe you have no anti-fraud in place, then of course you're going to have a lot of criminal fraud. Or like a really common situation would be, a merchant starts out with using like Stripe or PayPal or something like this, and then switches to using a full merchant account, that they got through an acquire. Well, if they didn't know better, they might not put any anti-fraud in place or any other systems or velocity checks, IP, duplicate checks, those kind of things. If those aren't in place, you likely have a lot of criminal fraud, a lot of just issues, if say you're allowing duplicates to happen or these kind of things. Whereas, if you're further in your journey and you have these tools in place, really once you put a decent anti-fraud system in place, you've taken care of a majority of your criminal fraud. Not all of it for sure, but a decent amount. It's at least the easy stuff. And then the remainder is mostly going to be friendly fraud, unless you have a major error. Like I've seen it where, maybe an engineering error or just a logic error. Like, let's say, for example, removing the star in a rollup. That could cause a lot of problems. Or doing a mass, refunding or accepting a bunch of transactions that shouldn't have been. Whatever, if it's a merchant mistake, that's different. But if you take that away, most of it'll be some form of friendly fraud. And it's very hard to classify. And so, then back to what I said around, the metrics, I like to look at it and like I've described friendly fraud as fraud that it looks like someone you know. So is it, fraud coming in on somebody that has been with you a long time, placed a lot of orders, maybe done a bunch of recurring transactions. Maybe it's a first transaction, but it's a recurring product. And if you look closely at it or, get someone like me or part of our team to review your system and you find that your offer wasn't clear enough, so maybe people didn't realize they were doing a subscription, these kind of things, that's friendly fraud. It's not criminal. So whereas if it's somebody you'd never seen before and, maybe it's a newer email address, it's an IP that has been, defrauding you a lot, there's these kind of things, then it's more criminal fraud. But just really what matters is getting those metrics nailed down and being consistent with them. And if you refine them, making sure that people know that and that you would either adjust back or that you put that note somewhere so that the people looking at these things over time realize why there was a change. That communication can be key. I think just think about how your data is handled. Make sure your messaging is clear internally around these metrics. And remember, really, if it's probably friendly fraud in many cases. And, especially if you've had a big spike recently and you change something. If you can't figure out why, it's probably fraud. So that's all I've got for today. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.